Welcome back to the channel. Today we are covering my time with the all-new Santa Cruz Bronson 5. I picked this bike up from Jensen USA, and I do have an affiliate link in the description below if you're looking to pick one up for yourself. I was able to take this thing up to Whistler, Squamish, and had a great winter and spring around the Pacific Northwest. I've been a fan of the Bronson since the 3, but I've always leaned towards the Nomad for what I like to ride and where I like to ride. When this guy was released, I was intrigued by all the claims. And if you want more specs, check out my original review video here. For this review, we're going to talk more about how it is to live with the Bronson, what I've done to get the most out of this platform, and how it's held up. The all-mountain trail bike category has gotten really heated recently, and it makes some of these Enduro bikes just seem a bit less interesting for the average rider. But is the Bronson 5 actually all it's cracked up to be? Before we get into it, please subscribe. I'm hoping to hit 10,000 subscribers before Crankworks. I feel like we've seen a lot of new bikes recently, but what are you looking forward to? Drop a comment with what you think is just around the corner. Let's jump right into the fun stuff and how the new Bronson 5 gets down. First off, for high speed and chunk, that is probably the biggest change from the 4 to 5. The bike just eats up chunder. There are few bikes that handle consecutive hits and just relentless brake bumps like the Bronson. This is the only bike in its travel category that I gave a 5. And while some bikes come close, it outperforms many bikes with 10 or 20 millimeters more travel. It's a combination of the longish back end with a suspension curve and tuning that recovers quickly and is almost velcroed to the ground. When the hits get big enough, you will find the end of that travel, but even then, the Bronson has more progressivity to keep your ankles mostly feeling good. This was a place I made some changes with volume reducers. Next, in the steeps, this is another area the Bronson leaves almost nothing on the table. Like with high speed and chunk, the Bronson handles things closer to an Enduro bike until it doesn't. It would seem nothing makes up for the lack of travel, but that's just evident on those really big impacts. So I put a larger volume spacer in the shock to help with the flat landings and harsh G-outs. Then I also tried it with the Fox 38 on the front. While I would definitely recommend the volume spacers if you find yourself on the bottom out bumper often, I'm not sure I'd go with the 38. After riding the 38 and 36 back to back, the 38 has a better feel overall, but with the increased stiffness of the new 36, I get the feeling that that new fork would be ideal. I've said it in the past that I love the stiff feeling of the Santa Cruz's newer low-link bikes like the Nomad, Mega Tower, and even that 5010. With the 5010 even warranting a stiffer fork, but I was surprised to find what felt like flex when I mounted up the 38. I'm always looking for balance in my bikes, and the 36 just seems like the better balance. But I'm honestly really excited to check out that new 36 when I can. Moving on, the Bronson's geometry is another thing that makes it feel unflappable in the steeps. The stack is actually taller than my Nomad, and right in line with many Enduro bikes. So the body position approaching those near vertical fall lines is exactly what you'd want. The updated suspension also behaves predictably, and when you push in with your heels, there seems to be no end to the grip. I'm going to skip to corners before we talk about jumps. Cornering was another area that did impress me, but was almost confusing. The Bronson 4 was an incredibly fun bike to rip corners and seemed to find transition everywhere. The new bike isn't as quick to pump and pop off of everything in sight, but it's much better when finding grip is an issue. It's still well balanced. Where the old bike predictably slid when pushed, the new bike has a few more mph before it gets sideways. So lastly, jumping. I went back and forth a lot with my feelings on the new Bronson, how it jumps. My first run on Dirt Merchant just felt like the bike required more effort, and while still not pedaling, I was pumping harder and pushing more. I'd been riding the Da Vinci Chainsaw and then the Nomad all summer, and those bikes just flowed down the trail with less effort and thought. The more I rode it, the more I got used to it, and the other two long-term bikes I had recently were not the most energetic. Those bikes being the Forbidden Dreadnought, the other one being the new Hightower. However, it felt like the Hightower was lighter on its feet. Not by much, but riding back-to-back at Duthie Hill here in Washington, it was definitely there. Then, when I compared it to the Dreadnought, it just felt similar. And let's be real, that is a big bike. But it was with bikes like the Yeti SB135 and Pivot Trailcat LT that reminded me what above average and excellent should feel like. And I'm going to settle on average for the Bronson's jumping abilities. Everything I talked about for steeps and chunk help with big jumps, but make for a slightly less energetic bike on more trail-sized hits and steep lips.
Holy shit.
Now let's jump right into climbing. When this bike was released, a lot of the attention was given to that new suspension. But I think the bigger change was the geometry. The seat tube is significantly steeper, the reach longer, and the rear center slightly longer. The body position is, in my opinion, as good as it gets for a mullet bike. Yes, the weight could be slightly better around switchbacks with a longer rear center, but then you'd have a longer bike, which is its own type of issue. It definitely doesn't feel as efficient as bikes with less travel, but I was never reaching for the climb switch, and it didn't feel like it was giving up efficiency for traction. The balance is spot on. When it came to switchbacks, it still performs well. As these bikes get longer, they're going to struggle more, and while my benchmark switchback took more than one try and was harder than the new Hightower, it did it with the expected amount of effort. This all adds up to a bike that is more comfortable and better weighted for tricky climbs and long days in the saddle. Let's talk about how this thing held up and what changes could or I did make. Long-term reviews can be up to a year if I own the bike and really like the bike. I've owned the Bronson for nearly 8 months. First off, I did put on a heavier duty rear tire, as well as some different grips. One thing I didn't do that I thought I would do was put a larger rotor on the rear. The brakes never seem to be an issue. I've been riding a number of different wheels and tires. I feel the Bronson is a great platform to really test the extremes. I also put a longer version 3 one-up dropper, and that's one of my primary complaints. It seems like if they shifted everything down, they could have done something about that C-post insertion. I also wanted to see if throwing a Fox 38 would unlock any additional performance out of the Bronson. I do prefer the feeling of the 38 on longer descents, but overall I think the 36 is a good fit. With the right volume reducers in the fork and shock, the bike had a very balanced feel front to back. I talked about it in the Hightower versus Bronson comparison, but I think the taller head tube better braces the fork, and I never had to clean the headset to get rid of a creak. I did clean the headset when swapping forks, so it was cleaned and re-greased 3 times in the past 8 months, but never because of noise. Overall, I would say the other kind of big issue were the SRAM transmission. It kind of moved forward when I was doing bigger descents, and how the paint just didn't hold up like what I've experienced in the past. It's fine, but I often give Santa Cruz a 5 for this category, and their attention to detail is still good, but I couldn't give it a 5 due to the paint. It's just more chipped than usual and has more fine scratching. So how does it look in the Loam library? A solid 42 puts it near the top of the list. It's an above average climber and descends at the level of many enduro bikes. Value is arguable, but the Santa Cruz warranty is hard to beat, and save for the paint, the attention to detail with the frame protection, grease ports, and overall function is as good as it gets. I do just wish Santa Cruz had more variation in their builds, and it would be nice to see them bring back aluminum frames. Let's talk comparisons real quick. I'm not going to go in depth about the Hightower here, because I have a full video, so check that one out if you're wondering. I also have a video here comparing it to the other MX bikes in Santa Cruz's range. Aside from those, the one that I think makes the most sense is the Bronson versus the new Transition Sentinel. Mostly the MX versus MX. Climbing the Sentinel does feel faster. That's probably the biggest difference. I don't know that it is faster, it just feels like it has a bit more get up and go. Descending, the Bronson wins out at higher speeds and chunky trails. It all comes down to suspension. On steeps, they're very comparable, and while the Bronson wins against the Sentinel setup dual 2.9, when setup mixed, it's hard to find any daylight. Jumping is a different story. That get up and go feeling translates to a livelier bike that loves moving about the trail and jumps. Cornering, they are closer, with the Bronson better in big and loose corners, and again the Sentinel being livelier skipping down the trail. Value, I've had experience with both warranty procedures, and it's been good. I'd like to see the bearing warranty like with Santa Cruz, but due to Transition's choice in build kits, I think they offer a bit more value, at least on the less expensive side. Quality-wise, Transition has been doing better and better. I still think the Bronson is slightly easier to live with, but overall I think it's a draw. Let me know if there's a comparison you're looking for, but for now, I'm going to try and keep it direct. So as far as mullet options with the same travel, we have the Ibis Ripmo. These bikes feel very different on the trail. The Ripmo has a noticeably more rigid feeling while climbing. Depending on the terrain, it can feel faster, but when things are steppy or technical, it doesn't have the traction of the Bronson. Body position is another area where it differs and will likely come down to fit, but as far as climbing, the short back end puts your weight further back, making steep climbs and switchbacks require more effort. Descending, I would say the DW Link feels more nimble and playful, but when it comes to chunky desert trails like this, the Bronson outperforms the Ripmo, as well as in steeps and overall for the corners. The bikes look very similar on paper, but for better or worse, the Bronson is a brute by comparison. So who's the Bronson for, and what are my final thoughts? The Bronson is a solid all-arounder that's at home in the bike park or on big rides. It's a bike that's great at having fun, and the updates go a long way to make a confident descender that can still be pedaled. It's not an enduro bike or a dedicated enduro racer, but because of that, it won't feel out of place between the tape or in the Alpine. I've had a lot of comments about enduro bikes not being enduro because some pros choose less travel, or last year's EWS winner's bike wasn't all that slack or low. That's a conversation for the product managers and the reality of those riders' abilities. I admit that some enduro bikes are getting maybe too downhill, but that was never an issue for the Nomad, and the Bronson always held its own in the Santa Cruz lineup. Oh, are you familiar with the smoothie? Like I've said about other new all-mountain bikes, the Bronson expands its abilities in both directions. Santa Cruz delivered on their promise of more traction and less feedback, and the new geometry sets you up for even the gnarliest descent. The Bronson is more brute, but it's still as fun as ever. Thanks for watching. Spring is here and the reviews are coming fast. Subscribe so you don't miss out. If you're looking to pick one of these things up, please click through the affiliate links in the description below. Jensen USA has this and more. There's no additional cost to you and it greatly helps the channel. Now get out there, go fast, and take chances. See you next week.